Namaste, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on this exciting and interesting panel discussion that we have. I'm absolutely thrilled to have four esteemed panelists here up on stage. So you're in for a treat. The collective experience, the knowledge that they bring to the table is excellent. So I'm very looking forward to this. So my name is Vijay Krishnan. I'm the MD and head of Asia Pacific for Rystad Energy. I'm based in Singapore. I'm very pleased to be here. And it's been a tremendous few days for us. So thank you to the organizers for putting something fantastic together. What we are talking today about is going from pilot to planetary, accelerating the adoption and deployment of CCUS technologies. Now, India is the third largest emitter of CO2 emissions in the world. China and US are sort of leading that. And India presently emits close to 2.65 gigatons of CO2 annually, which is approximately 7% of the world's total CO2 emissions, back in, this is about 5 years ago now, and from that stats. But it is significantly smaller compared to China and the US. But we have to applaud the ambition that the Indian government and the policymakers have in terms of setting targets. Mr. Sinha, you were involved in that white paper some years ago as well at COP26, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of setting goals, in terms of how to reduce that. Now, based on Rystad Energy's forecast for this year, global CO2 emissions, we think, will peak, right? And a lot of that is because of technology. A lot of that is also, despite the headwinds, CCUS is going pretty well. But what we want to hear from you today, esteemed panelists, is what are the different business models, opportunities, challenges we see that we can potentially fast-track this and really grow from good to great, right? So before we go into the questions, we will have opening remarks from each of our panelists. Alex, if I may invite you to say your opening remarks, and then we will go down all the way to Mr. Atanu at the end. Over to you, Alex.
My name is Alex Grant. I work for a company called Equinor. For those of you that don't know it, it's a Norwegian energy company headquartered in Stavanger with operations in around 15 countries around the world. We have three main legs to our strategy. The biggest, largest oil and gas production, trying to sustain that over the next decades. We have offshore wind, building that at the moment. That we're very much in execution phase. We have three major projects, one in Poland, one in the UK, and one in the US, where we're spending in total gross for the three projects over $10 billion building those three, or trying to build the one in the US. And then our third leg is low carbon solutions, as we call it, and the cornerstone of that is carbon capture and storage. And there we are beyond pilots. We now have 4 FID'd full-scale projects, which we are, one we have completed, Northern Lights Phase 1, and 3 we're currently in construction of. 2 of those are in the UK, and the other one is an expansion of Northern Lights. So we are really spending proper dollars, and we're learning a lot about the technologies, how to improve them, but also as important, which I'll speak to do a little bit more later, the economics and how those work, and the real economics versus the PowerPoint economics.
Thank you, Alex. Mr. Sinha?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Very distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my co-panelist, Vijay. When I say the discussion panels on CCUS, I recall 2 years back in Indian Energy Week, I was part of the panel, but the topic there was how to initiate, how to design, conceive the pilots. 2 years back, I am talking about. And today, you see the title, we are talking about pilots to planetary scale. As Vijay, you said, India is the third largest emitter, 2.65 gigatons per annum. So this requires huge efforts on a scale which only CCUS applications can provide in the effort to decarbonize. So this planetary scale is very important thing, and this scale is I think it it won't cover just one project. It will cover many projects, many areas, many basins, many sectors, maybe beyond boundaries of nations also. So where we stand today in India, we are looking for storing, uh, we are starting rather tons of CO2, and we look forward to go to the scale of million tons tomorrow, and maybe gigatons, as you said. India is the third largest emitter, so we need to reach to that gigaton per annum stage. Then only our goal of CCUS for the nation will happen. And there is another issue of once we sequester, it's not question of few years of sequestration. It has to be decades, maybe centuries also. So this, as I see CCUS as a bridge, uh, must be, I can call it, this is a bridge between the carbon intensive reality which we are having in India, and it's a bridge between what we foresee in the net zero future, which every nation, every company has plans to achieve that net zero. So CCUS is definitely a bridge between what we are emitting today and what we aim at 2070. So, and also it's not a mere technology. Uh, it will lead us. Again, it's a bridge between in Indian context, because we are India is an energy starved country. So it is a bridge between energy supply, energy fulfillment, and sustainable environments. So I think this is my view at the initial stage. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mr. Sinha. Mr. Gupta, if I can invite you to say your
Yeah,
opening remarks.
thank you, Krishan, and good morning to you all. Uh, just to add to what Alex said and Sinaji said, I think it's very important to understand that without CCUS, our journey of decarbonization will not be complete. That's the most important fact. So CCUS will have to be taken care of, will have to be implemented come what may. And I think this panel discussion today should throw some light on how to overcome those challenges in the journey of implementing CCUS. Today, I think when you talk of CCUS, we are almost, I think we are perhaps nowhere. The carbon capture is almost insignificant. We have to scale it up without doubt. And as India is one of the fastest growing economies, our industrial sector is already showing phenomenal growth. And with this growth will definitely give us more carbon emissions. And when we talk of all those sectors like the steel, the cement, the oil and gas, and other chemicals, I think the CO2 emissions are going on a rise. So I represent GAIL. Today in GAIL, we could be about 3 million tons of CO2 emission. But there are some projects on the anvil. Once they are complete, I think we could see something like 12 to 13 million tons. But that is again a very small number compared to what we are witnessing as a nation. We will have to discuss today what should be done so that the CCUS becomes integral to all our projects, upcoming projects, new projects, the existing projects, so that the journey towards decarbonization can actually be achieved. I think as organizations, we already have set net zero targets, all of us. We have advanced them somebody is doing by 2040, we are doing by 2035. Without CCUS, will not be able to achieve net zero. That is very clear. So I think as opening remarks, I would only urge that all of us as industry captains, industry leaders, I think going forward, we start collaborating and we start looking at ways and means to see that we scale it up. So that is the agenda today. And let us see, we should be able to discuss at least some aspects of this. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. Mr. Atanu, over to
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much. Wonderful comments and insights by all of you. And I'll just draw upon what Alex, Mr. Sinha, and Mr. Gupta talked about. Yeah, so one of the things that we see is that scale is one of the biggest, impactful things and one of the most challenging things, right, in carbon capture around the world, not only in India, right? And so how do we take from pilot to scale of gigaton scale? That's crucial, so absolutely. And there are multiple components which drive how scale can be achieved. People talk about learning curve multipliers, doing many and then getting scale. That's one aspect, but I think there are fundamental challenges and approaches in engineering and economics which drive scale, right? Which we need to look at from an India perspective. That's one. Second, I think more importantly is tied to scale and other aspects has got to do with the economics, right? Economics is fundamentally important, right? I mean, you can have the best technology, but if the economics is not something which works, then it's difficult to implement it, difficult to get it through. So the right kind of economics around the technology stack of the entire CCUS value chain becomes very important. And optimizing the economics across the chain is very important. And that's not only a function of technology, it's a function of how these different CCUS projects are organized, right? Things like hub and cluster models, how do you leverage economics of transportation and economics of storage. So I think that becomes very important in terms of driving adoption. The third thing that we see and is probably important has got to do a lot with financing and bankability, right? Unless there's a risk absorber, right, at scale to be able to finance the infrastructure required for this at cost of capital which is reasonable to drive economics and adoption, it's very difficult for it to go forward. And so, for example, the work that we did with the policy, around policy with Niti Aayog and others, we talked about something called the Carbon Capture Finance Corporation, which drives, the adoption through the right kind of bankability and financing, which otherwise people would not come forward to. And I think finally, importantly, is to tie all this, it's got to have a business model which works.
Yeah.
And so I think initially it'll start with pilots and then it'll go to projects and larger projects, but eventually it needs to, I think, based on what we see, it needs to be a utility model, right? Just like power, wastewater, and such others. So essentially what it's saying is that the emitter whose core competency is running a corporation, running or manufacturing something, says, I'm going to buy this service from you, right, at a certain cost. And there's a provider which is organized in a way which is able to capture, haul, and store or convert, for that matter, the CO2 into the right kind of element. So I think that business model is very important, and encouraging that business model is driven by financing, driven by economics, driven by scale. And as we talk about planetary scale, going from pilot to planetary scale, I think that the eventual goal, if this is done right, is going to be just like power grids. You'll have CO2 grids, right, which is tying these different emission points together and driving what you call seamless capture, transmission, and storage, just like power, right? Just like wastewater. So I think that's the eventual goal. I think we should drive the overall adoption at scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's quite lots to get around on in terms of all of your opening remarks, and I think you've touched on quite a few key points here. But I always like to start with why, and so maybe Mr. Gupta, I'm gonna look at you for this in terms of like why is CCUS important for India? I mean it's as we've heard, snippets from Alex and Atanu and so on in terms of the challenges and the economics already. We haven't got into it yet. But why is it important, and why must we stay the course on this?
Okay. So I'll just go back to my opening remarks. I already mentioned that CCUS is important for decarbonization. It is important to achieve the net zero targets. As a nation, we want to be completely decarbonized by 2070. We also said that we have to be almost half of what we are producing or emitting today by 2050. But most importantly, see the industries that you have. All these industries like the refineries, the oil sector, the chemicals, the cement and the steel. Now these sectors, they will be CO2 emitters. The reason being because you may do whatever electrification you want to do, but even then, the process or the scheme is such that you will still end up using fossil fuels. And we are growing as a nation. We are growing an economy. The industry is on a trajectory of growth. Now, with this kind of hard to abate sectors, we have to devise a strategy so that we can make these sectors sustainable. We cannot say today that I have a steel plant or a power plant and it is emitting CO2. So I strand it. I say, okay, oh, sorry, boss, I cannot survive you. We have to survive them. Now, when we talk of the renewable energy, we say 50% of country's power is coming from renewables, but then 50% is coming from thermal power plants. So whatever you may do, you will still need that base load going forward. And when you talk of base load capacities in thermal power, CO2 emissions are bound to be there. Now, as a nation, we have to sustain them. We have to survive them. And with their survival is nation's growth, with their survival is employment, with their survival is economic development, and everything that we see around us. So therefore, CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, has to play a critical role in ensuring the longevity of these sectors, these industries, so that, and that is okay, that is number one. Number two, the acceptability of the low carbon products is becoming more and more. You cannot survive with products with high carbon intensity. So you'll have to prove to the world that our products are low carbon products. And that is how you become acceptable. So if we talk of steel exports, we have to produce low carbon steel. We have to produce green steel. So therefore, I think CCUS is extremely crucial for all of us. We'll have to integrate CCUS in our designs, in our project configurations, in our project estimates right from the beginning. We'll come to the challenges of CCUS maybe in the second round. But as of now, that is my take on why CCUS is so important.
Excellent. And I think, India's growth in terms of energy demand has just been phenomenal. And our views is that it's going to be continuing that trajectory out to 2050. And so the additional demand that's coming in, can be met from both by using CCUS. So 100% agree. And I think when we talk about energy security, energy diversity equals energy security, right? If you think about it. So excellent. Thank you very much. So maybe we can hear a little bit from you, Mr. Sinha, in terms of you've talked about the pilots, what are the initiatives, what are the learnings from these pilots that you may wish to share?
Okay.
And all the initiatives that you're doing at ONGC's level. Thank you.
Yeah. As far as CCUS is concerned, for ONGC, we realized the importance of CCUS long back. And because as NOC, as an upstream company, we have the advantage of understanding of subsurface. So we foresaw that yes, this is going to come, and how to deal with it, let us prepare ourselves. So we had a multifaceted, I will say, approach towards CCUS in ONGC. We started, or rather screened all the depleted reservoirs, not only depleted, all the even producing reservoirs, which can be a candidate for uh, at this stage enhanced oil recovery through CO2. It will definitely add to the sequestration. So we started screening and we completed screening of all those candidate reservoirs. Then we designed pilots. These pilots basically they are the demonstration projects. Yes, we have moved beyond R&D, and we want to demonstrate that yes, CO2 can be stored safely without any risk in the subsurface. And we had the advantage of, as I said, being upstream company, the understanding of the sinks, their behavior, geological complexities. So this is one part. Third, we went aggressively for the collaborations. We wanted to learn as quickly as possible how the other leading companies are doing CCS or CCUS. We worked with Equinor also, Alex. We went to the Northern Lights. We saw how it is happening, and we worked with many other companies to learn as fast as possible about CCUS. So about the initiatives, what ONGC has taken, we conceived a big project, big in the sense that it's a more than 500 million project and targeting to use 1,500 tons of CO2 per day. But we realized that this kind of project will not be viable at this stage. No company, because at this stage there is no uh, commercial model available in the nation to use that. So we already designed a big project, but we wanted to start with a demonstration project, so that we have done, and very soon the implementation will start on that. So demonstration project, all the studies, all the work on the drawing board is over, and we are ready to go to the field in Western sector to start the. It will be the first, I think, demonstration project. But at this stage, in Indian context, we need many more demonstration projects. That is need of the hour. That is the need of the hour. So, and we also we have facilitated, because today we do not have any commercial model and policy support. So we have provided our inputs very thoroughly, very detailed inputs to our policy decision makers, to Niti Aayog. We have contributed through many documents which takes the shape of the upcoming commercial model in the country. So this is this status, and we want to really, as Tanu said, there is a very important element that for CCS projects to happen is map the various sources, emissions, and sinks. So we need to have I will say, carbon atlas of the nation, where any industry, whether it is hard to abate industry or any carbon, they need, and they easily find an infrastructure where they can offer their CO2, and the rest can be taken care by the by the these projects. So I think we are at this stage, and we are very aggressively looking towards partnership, towards collaboration, so that we speed up the implementation part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think it's very exciting, and I like the idea of partnerships and lessons learned, and you touched on the scalability as well. Atanu also touched on that earlier. I think so, Alex, I'm looking at you because I think the Northern Lights, in so many ways, has been the Northern Lights for CCUS globally, right? And more than just a metaphor. And it's also the biggest tourist attraction, I think, in Norway. What are your lessons, though? And I think, what are what can you share from that experience that you all have?
Yeah. So I think fellow panelists have touched on it, it's drawing upon lessons learned elsewhere. And I think lessons learned are not just the successes, it's also learning from the mistakes. And I think every company should do that as they progress along. It's focusing on the mistakes and how to learn from them as much as what's been done right. I'll draw my learnings from three main projects that we've done. The first one is we've been injecting CO2 not for pressure support, for pure disposal for 30 years in the NCS, or just coming up to 30 years. And then we've now injected almost 30 million tons of CO2 just for storage. And that was, starting 30 years ago, we had no CO2 targets. There was no discussion. So we weren't doing it because we needed to meet some decarbonisation target. We did it because we thought it was the cheapest way to dispose of the CO2. We had to strip the CO2 out of the gas anyway at Sleipner because it was too CO2 heavy. We had all of this CO2, policy not to vent. Do you send it back to shore? What do you do with it? Cheapest way is to inject it into the ground, and that we worked out was cheaper than paying the carbon tax, the CO2 tax, which there was still one then in Norway. That has taught us a lot. And the big piece that we have is that I'm not pretending it's easy, but storing CO2 is much easier than producing oil and gas. It's much safer as well. So there's still a lot of challenges, of course, but it is a more simple process than producing oil and gas. And the beauty of Norway, I'm an Englishman working for a Norwegian company, but it is massively transparent. So that data that we have, a lot of it is available for anyone to see and learn on being able to store the CO2 safely for a long time. So we have a lot of people working on the technicalities of can you store it safely, but it's not our biggest challenge when it comes to commercialization of CO2. Our biggest challenge is on economics and value chains. And the economics, Northern Lights Phase 1, I'll move on to now. It's expensive. So it's a first of a kind in terms of the first open source carbon capture, but it's cost us a lot of money. The learnings we are taking from it, this, by the way, is 1.5 million tons per annum of injection, and it's fully subscribed. We have 4 dedicated CO2 vessels which sail around to the coast, some in Norway and into Europe, pick up CO2, take it up to Norway, and then inject it in the ground, and we charge a fee for that. It cost us around $700 million to build, 750, for 1.5 million tons. So the first, just on a scalability perspective, to sort of give some numbers around it, we've just now sanctioned phase 2. That's 5 million tons. It's going to cost us roughly $700 to $750 million. So just from the phase 1 to phase 2. So first learning scale, it really is a big factor. The second we're learning is on learning by doing technology. So little things, but added up, make a difference. So for example, we've worked out perhaps the CO2 doesn't need to be quite so pure as we first thought when we inject it. So slightly less pure CO2 that you're injecting down, it's cheaper for the emitters who can send with a slightly low quality. It's still high, by the way, but slightly less than we first thought. We're working out that actually we thought you needed to have continuous injection, continuous rates, but maybe there is a bit of variability in the rates. We're now working on, instead of having to bring it to shore to pipe, bring the ship to shore to then pipe it out, can you directly inject it from the vessel? So there's all these technological pieces that we're working on, which again means that new phases, new projects can be cheaper and better. But the third, and by far the most important when it comes to economics, is value chains. So we talk about collaboration, but again, putting that into practice. Let's say we build Northern Lights and we've got our charge, and then the emitter, who needs subsidies from his or her own government, doesn't get them or is late, and is 2 years late on the contract. Who pays? We're sat having spent all the money to collect the CO2, and it's not there. So who's taking that risk? Do we say, emitter, you have to pay us even whether or not you've got your project ready, in which case emitters' economics look horrible, or do we say we'll take that risk, in which case our economics look horrible? And this is subsidies on both sides, or carbon tax and chains, and then what about the transportation in the middle? What happens if that's not ready? Who's taking the risk on that? And when you start adding up those risks, the project costs, the overall economics, go up massively. In Northern Lights, the government solved it. It said, you companies have to take this risk, or you, Northern Lights, have to take the risk, but here's 80% of the capex. Cash donation. That makes it much easier for us to be able to accommodate the risk. By the way, that risk came to bear. We had Northern Lights ready to take CO2, and none of the projects were ready. But when you have 80% of the capex paid for you, it kind of helps lessen that burden. In the UK, we've FID'd a project, the Endurance Store and the Northern Endurance Partnership. So we are currently building it. It was FID'd, final investment decision, a year ago. There, the UK government hasn't given us any of the capex, but what they've said is, we'll take that risk. So you store, go build your store. You transport, go build your transport. You emitter, go and build your emitter. And you're all worried about if you're ready and someone else isn't ready and you haven't got the value chain and you're sat waiting with a project for years and years, we'll guarantee the revenues or the payments. So it's a different model the UK government has used to the Norwegian model. It will be one that will end up being much cheaper for the UK government if all the projects are ready on time, and it's one that will end up being more expensive for the UK government if there are differences or gaps. But the lowest common denominator will be the one that drives that value chain. To the point already made, we do believe that over time, as it's not point to point, and as you get that grid and system, this risk comes out a lot, because I don't really worry if that power station hasn't got its carbon capture and storage yet, because I'm connected to a big grid of CO2 and I can buy it and it becomes liquid, and it's a much more fungible commodity. So maybe that risk as you build out a system decreases over time. But at the moment, that is the biggest challenge. It's the economics of the value chain, which just make it more expensive. But that, I think, will come down over time.
Thank you. That was very, very informative, Alex. And I think I come from tiny little Singapore, and there's talk about building a CCS hub again, but across different jurisdictions. The issue has always been about scale. And again, the government has to come in and do some sort of a backstop and so on, but it's costly. And that's part of the challenges I think we have, right? But I think with India, I think we have, I'm not a proponent of carbon tax at this point in time. I think we're already dealing with very high inflation across so many different things. But there's got to be a different way to kind of incentivize and motivate industry to get into it. And I think therein lies the challenge, I think, from a policymaker's perspective. And you highlighted this point, which I think, I'm a favor of, which is open source. But again, that is another question mark that I think we need to kind of think about how would we do that and apply that in India's context, right? But the federal government does have to get involved with this in a bigger way, and I think they are trying their best to do that. So that's been very encouraging. Thank you for that, Alex. I think, we always talk about CCS, but the U part is something that I think we kind of sometimes overlook or don't think about. Well, what are your thoughts on the utilization, and given the scale we have in India, and I think even if you think about how much could be used or not, right? What are your thoughts? I mean, you've done a lot of work in this area, and love to hear from you on that point.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, so I think on the face of it, utilization will appear very, very appealing, right? Because, you're basically translating CO2 or a waste into value. And that's what it looks at the surface. But here are some of the, the facts based on a basic analysis. So if you look at the world and you say, you know what, I could make all the chemicals, major chemicals, like let's say you got plastics, right? Or let's say you got, urea, which is fertilizers from ammonia. Or let's say you got, methanol. So this is like significant amount of what you call chemicals, which dominates the world. If I say through some what you call mechanism, I'm able to use CO2 and hydrogen route to what you call convert all this stuff, right? Capture CO2. Even if you were to do that, let's say if you were to do that, you would only consume or reduce about 3 to 4% of the total CO2 emitted in the world. So 3 to 4% of the CO2, if you take out and convert, it'll be sufficient to what you call, make all the chemicals that you require, right, in the world. So therefore, this is a scaling problem. You cannot, what you call, utilize your way or convert your CO2 into what you call products to decarbonize. It'll only use a very small part. So therefore, storage becomes an essential enabler, right, for scaling carbon capture and decarbonization for different sectors that people talked about, like hard-to-abate sectors, at scale. That's a fundamental, what you call, mathematical reality that you cannot get across. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two is that the economics of converting CO2 into valuable products like a methanol, for example, or mineral aggregates are challenging, right? Unless you have got the underlying constituents like hydrogen, right, at a price, clean hydrogen at a price which makes sense. So, for example, if you were to do methanol production from CO2, your cost will be 3 or 4 times more than what it would be from a natural gas-based methanol, right, production. So the question is, how do you mitigate that? You can provide, subsidies, for example, incentives to drive that whole point home, but there's a limit to which you can drive subsidies, right? So therefore, the whole ecosystem of CO2 to value or CO2 utilization is useful, is valid, and can be applied to certain precincts where it makes sense. So for example, a CO2 EOR, that makes sense if the price of oil is right. Again, this is a catch out here, right? I mean, if the CO2 delivered price is more than $45, to the injection, for EOR well, and the price of oil is below 70, it'll not work. So therefore, it becomes production of oil based on the price and the dynamics change. So similarly, CO2 to aggregates, mineral aggregates, is certainly, yes, valuable at scale. So this CO2 to methanol, if hydrogen price is low, right, depending upon where you get the clean hydrogen from, yes, absolutely it'll work, right, at some premium. So I think how you carve the whole thing out in terms of economics, because basically there's something called in chemical and physical kinetics and thermodynamics, this is what kills you, right? So you have, CO2 is the most stable state of energy, and you want to bring it up to something else, it just costs you more. So how you do that is very important. And secondly, we got to recognize that, yes, everything's said and done, it has got a limit in terms of how much it can abate in terms of CO2 from the world, because there's the inherent limitation of the amount of chemicals that the world requires and the amount of CO2 that's required for doing that, even if we were to fantasize that I can convert all CO2 into chemicals. So I think those are some things that we want to keep in our context and mind and window before, and storage therefore becomes fundamentally important, right, in terms of technology, exploration, geology, economics, commerce. Just that becomes basic drive. Thank you.
Thank you. And the good news is India is blessed with fantastic storage facilities. I think in some of the geology allows for that in the Cambay Basin and in other areas. I think the studies have been proven to do that. But I'm conscious of time. I think we would have gone on for like several hours. I think easily, given the wealth of experience we have and the passion that you all bring to this topic. But I think just to summarize, I feel like, ladies and gentlemen, CCUS is an important, integral, if I'm going to quote Mr. Gupta, part of the energy transition and in the journey. And this is not transition for the sake of transition, but I think in the sense of like enabling oil and gas to continue to thrive and sort of enabling that sort of the growth in both demand as well as in terms of the economics and the wider economy of what India is hoping to achieve. But it is not without its challenges, and I think we've heard that today. And a lot of it is around scalability, economics, and what sort of policy support I think we can do to sort of enable the success. But I'm an eternal optimist, which I think we all have to be if we work in the energy industry. And I'm very optimistic that a couple of years from now, if we were to sit back here, I would see that we would be able to start not just going from pilot programs to actually sort of delivering on it. And I think we have good experiences from Equinor and from a lot of other companies all around the world to tap into and develop that further. So with that, I say thank you very much to all my panelists for very insightful and honest conversations. So thank you very much for that. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, to give them a huge round of applause.